So let's look at a structure for reflective writing. A good starting point is to consider reflective thinking. We all engage in reflective thinking, and actually when we're doing this, particularly when discussing with others, our thinking tends to be quite unstructured, and indeed reflective writing can be unstructured. For example, if you keep a personal diary, that can just be a collection of experiences and ideas, thoughts, feelings, and this can actually be quite unstructured. But for reflective writing, we tend to consider it as having a very careful structure because this helps the reflective thinking on occurrences in the classroom. And as we saw before, there are three stages. In the first stage of reflective writing, we have description. What happened? What is being examined? Simple questions to answer for the reflective practitioner. The important thing to remember at this point, especially for a teacher in a busy school, the description needs to be quite short. You don't want to spend all of your time and effort simply describing occurrences which happen. It's the interpretation and the consideration of outcomes which are much more significant. So it's best to keep it as short as possible. Interpretation, for example, what was most important? What was most interesting? What was most useful from this experience? What relevant information can I take from this and use it in future sessions? The interpretation is perhaps the most complex part of reflective writing, but the most significant. It's about linking theory to practice, and it's also about analyzing what happened. So further questions you can ask are, how can you explain the occurrence from a theoretical or an academic standpoint? And how is this similar or different to other occurrences that you've experienced as a teacher? How can you make connections and find common strands through your experiences? And then, of course, you have the outcomes. What are you going to do with this reflection? How are you going to use the information? What have you learned as a teacher, as a professional, about this experience? So there are, in relation to these three stages, 4 key points for us to remember as reflective practitioners. The first point is that reflection is very much an exploration and an explanation of your experiences in the classroom. Not just a description, but very much exploring and explaining. Genuinely reflective writing can often reveal your own insecurities, your anxieties about your experiences. There's nothing wrong with that, and it can very often help the reflective process. Remember, part of being a reflective practitioner is about being honest and truthful to yourself. So you could be picking up on weaknesses, but you also want to be looking at strengths and balancing these two viewpoints through the reflective writing. And it's also, in terms of the interpretation, important to focus on the very significant parts of the occurrences, not looking at the whole experience, but focusing on key points, key issues, which for some reason are important to you. And because of this, the description component needs to be short, not too long. You don't want to tell the whole story. Tell part of the story in detail. Get the information there which is useful. And then the final 2 parts of reflection are about reflecting forwards as well as reflecting backwards. reflecting back on what has happened, your experiences, how you feel about them, but also looking forward to how you can actually use these experiences and move beyond these experiences.